Ask any mother what it's like to lose a child. It doesn't matter whether he's, 5 or 55. It's never goes away.
First off, I suppose I'm just very sorry for your loss, Keith.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a year, I'll tell you that. Although as Matthew himself said a number of times in the last few years of his life, if I die suddenly, people will be shocked, possibly, but not surprised. And he may have even said that to you, for that matter. But yeah, it was a journey, that's for sure.
How was he? Like, what do you remember about young? I'd love to hear about young Matthew. Like, what was he like?
He was. I have to say, from the very beginning, it was clear he was unlike any other kid I knew. He had a spark that you couldn't quite contain. He was incredibly competitive. We used to play ping pong all the time, and when we started out, I played ping pong for a long time. I felt I was pretty good at it, but he was the family champion. They had family ping pong tournaments every time they went over to the grandparents for dinner. So when I first joined them and played ping pong with him for the first time, I beat his pants off, and he was furious, because if there's one thing that he hated, it was to lose. So he went down to the basement to the ping pong table, and he practiced and he practiced and he practiced, and it took him about a week and a half, and he was beating me. And but that's the kind of guy he was. When he played hockey,
he was competitive.
He played hockey. He had to score the most goals, and he was so mad at himself if he didn't. When he played tennis, he had to hit every shot perfectly, and when he didn't, he'd get very upset with himself. But he was that kind of very driven guy. Yeah. And he and his mother were as close as any two people I knew. Clearly loved each other quite intensely, but also, when they fought intensely. So they were quite a pair.
When he goes to Los Angeles when he starts trying to be an actor, now you had already, established yourself at this point, and you had sort of seen the industry from the inside and from the outside. When he goes to Los Angeles and he says, I want to be an actor, I want to try and do this thing, what's on your mind?
His mother was pretty heartbroken that he wasn't that he had moved, and so and we, for a variety of reasons, but certainly to be closer to Matthew was one of them, that we moved to LA ourselves. And that's when my American journey began. But he was into the acting by that point, and he was getting occasional roles on this and that and the other, Charles in Charge and so on, and clearly got the bug. And his dad had been in television commercials. I think had tried to do some acting, and was able to introduce him to some people, and that was, that connection that his father was able to make for him in Los Angeles was huge in terms of establishing him in the role that he would eventually achieve. But he was beginning to lose hope that he was actually going to be able to have a career in television or movies or anywhere else. And he kind of got to the point where he was indicating that if this doesn't work, if this next one doesn't work, I'm probably done. I don't think I'll bother with beating my head against the wall to try to be an actor if all I'm going to get is this occasional stuff. And then he, came by one day and said, there's this new show that they've offered me a part in, and I get to play somebody who's just like me, and it feels good, and there you go. It was Friends.
I mean, what's your feeling then when that thing takes off? Like, it's rare for anything to get that big.
Sure.
And then that show that Matthew's on, that Friends show, I mean, the fame doesn't even exist like that anymore.
No.
Are you concerned at all? Are you nervous at all?
Sure. And aware as we were, I mean, aware that there was some problem, that he was clearly abusing some kind of drug and losing a lot of weight, and it was something that was pretty hard to address with him. He didn't want to, obviously, and so he dodged those kinds of things. It would get to the point where the crisis would occur, and then it was, okay, we all realized something has to be done, and it was usually a health crisis or something that would bring it on early in his career. And he'd be in the hospital, and then the family would descend, and he would consent to going off to a rehab center. Multiple times that happened. And it would seem to work for a while. He would be determined he was going to beat this thing. And then, inevitably, he would fall back into it, often, some other drug or something. He became, as many addicts are, a world-class expert in drugs, in what does what, and how long it takes, and why it happens, and what happens to the brain, and all the rest of it. He just knew it inside out. It was, I cannot tell you how many nights we sat, Suzanne and me and his siblings sat by his bedside in some hospital or other while he was trying to recover from one of his bouts.
I can't imagine how hard that is, Keith, to have, again, like he's going through something so, something unique.
Yeah.
He is becoming this massive star. The world is at his fingertips.
Sure.
He's gone from being a kid hoping to make it in tennis to becoming this like household name on this generational sitcom. To me, watching on Thursday nights, it seems like everything's great and he's at the top of his game and he's bringing me so much joy. And I'm sure you're feeling that too. I'm sure you're so proud of him and look how everything's really worked out for him. Yeah. And at the same time, this is the understatement of the year, I can't imagine how hard it is and how worried you must have been for him.
Yes, yeah, truly. And at the same time, you read the book, so you know that there was, he had, ask any parent of an addict and they'll tell you they've got to blame somebody, and they tend to blame the parents. So there was that issue, and I think she wanted to be able to be close to him so that she could reestablish the kind of relationship they'd had, because she couldn't really understand what happened to it.
Yeah, there is that blame piece in the book that I didn't even think about, like, of course he would start to push back on his parents, or he would start to lash out a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it's, millions of people around North America are family members of an addict, and so they know what all this is about. Everybody goes through it, and you worry constantly about your family member. That the only solution has to come from them, but you're there whenever you're just in a panic and rushing over there whenever there's a crisis that you can somehow help with. And that one of the things about his struggle was that when he did get into trouble, the first person he would call was his mama, and we would go dashing down there, and or wherever he happened to be, and it's like, okay, that happened. What's next? Which meant, where are you going to send me to get some treatment? And he really, he so desperately wanted to get better, and yet, I think he probably wrote about this too, and I'm not telling tales out of school, that he'd be in a hospital somewhere or a rehab center, and he had, some girl on the outside running off to get drugs and bring them to him secretly. He had drugs. He attempted to have some opioids FedEx to him in a major New York hospital while he was being treated for drug addiction.
Yeah. Fame is a challenging thing. I talked to Riley Keough the other day, who's the granddaughter of Elvis and the daughter of Lisa Marie Presley. Yeah. And you know what she said to me? What? She said, my mother was struggling to get sober. My mother was doing her best to ward the bad folks away from her. But when she wanted something she couldn't have, there's nothing more powerful than the last name Presley.
Oh,
When
yeah.
you want something that you're not allowed to have. And I said, Riley, what did you mean by that? And she said, when you have fame, it's an added layer of difficulty because you can kind of get whatever you want.
Whatever you want, you bet. And like that, you know. So,
Frustrating.
well, yes, and sad. You know what the answer is. They know what the answer is. But I remember being frustrated one time, talking to him about these questions, and it just what you're doing is suicidal, and it was just getting like that, you know, because he knew it was, and he just looked at me and said, you know, you can't be mad at an addict. Just it isn't appropriate, and it doesn't work. So don't. He was right. He went through a period of years where he was really terribly badly addicted, and he got clean. This is one of the episodes. There were so many of them, and he announced to us one day, "I'm going to write a play. I'm going to write a play about an addict who gets clean and gets better, and I'm going to put it on the stage, and it's going to be a well-known play." And you're shaking your head as you're going home, thinking, "Oh yeah, come on, sure." He did. And it wasn't going to win a Pulitzer or anything, but it was on the stage on West End in London and off Broadway in New York, and it made money. And then, you know, when he came out of the throes of addiction this last time, he announced he was going to write a book. I had the same reaction. You're not, you're going to write a book? And he did. And, you know, it's selling millions of copies.
Yeah, it became a number one. I mean, I was with him on the day that it became the number one bestseller, and he was so proud. He looked at me and he said, I mean, I didn't know him from, I knew him from TV. And he looked at me, this dude who was about to interview him on stage, and said, "Can you believe it? Yeah. I have a number one New York Times bestseller. Can you believe it? I have one of these."
Yeah. Remember, a few months before that, he could barely walk from his house to his car.
Really?
He was slurring his words. He didn't make any sense. He couldn't. He going from one meal to another was a struggle for him. The idea that he could actually sit down and write a book, and that helped keep him clean, I guess. But I genuinely thought this time he's done it. You know, he's not only declared for the whole world what all of his problems were, but that he has this time fixed it, and he feels confident about it, and he has got a role in life now and a purpose, and he's going to do it. I really believed this time it was going to work. But again, this is the drug addict who understands everything about drugs. When he started getting ketamine treatments from a doctor, supervised, he told us repeatedly about how effective it was to make him, it would wipe any depression away. He'd feel good. And he didn't feel the need for drugs when he had a ketamine treatment, like for some opioid or something. And his mother was very suspicious of this. She didn't think ketamine was a good idea. But he kept saying, it's not addictive. That's the great thing about this drug. It's revolutionary. It's going to eradicate depression. But his addictive personality was so strong that he when the treatment stopped, he couldn't. And the typical behavior was, let's ramp up the amount of drug I take to the most a person can stand, because that was the pattern again and again.
Did you talk to him about this ketamine treatment? Did you express some nervousness or some suspicions? Or
not as much as I probably should have. I sort of bought the line that it was, and I think it is. It's a very effective treatment for certain kinds of depression, especially. And I've talked to numbers of psychiatrists who still recommend it and say that this incident, so well known, has actually harmed the treatment of depressives because they're afraid of ketamine where they shouldn't be in a treatment setting. But it's a wake-up call, that's for sure.
Keith, Where were you when you found out Matthew had passed?
Suzanne and I were walking the dog. Um, you know, we're walking through some brush on one of those moments you don't forget. And her phone rang, and it was his assistant calling. And he said in a kind of a strange and strangled voice, "You better sit down." And she said, "What are you talking about? I'm walking the dog." And then it was just, he announced, "Matthew's dead. Matthew's dead." And, kind of a brief explanation before he hung up. And, well, ask any parent who's lost a child. It's one thing for me. I'm his stepfather, and, we were close, but I'm his stepfather. I'm not his mother. Ask any mother what it's like to lose a child. It doesn't matter whether he's, 5 or 55. It's never goes away. So she's had a pretty tough year, I must say.
You find out, and then then the world finds out. I mean, I remember
Right.
getting the news alert, and I remember getting the messages, and people were writing me because I had only spoken to him a few months before.
Yeah.
What were the first few days like? I mean, to not just be dealing with this tremendous personal loss, but to see the world sort of grieving it, people trying to while you guys are trying to figure out answers, I'm sure, what exactly happened here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was confusing, very confusing.
Yeah.
There's a kind of a Hollywood version of what happens when you get a shock and are grief-stricken, and that's Hollywood. What happens, or at least what happened in our case, was, a very, very confusing rush of different kinds of feelings, just, from one to another. You're living in a different time, and then you're back in the present, and then you're angry about something, and then you're, everybody's sobbing, and then from one thing to another. Very, very confusing, and physically as well, kind of debilitating. It was a strange time. And then we were amazed to see all this incredible outpouring. It was, just another of the surprises where it came to Matthew.
What's been your reaction to seeing Matthew's death become a criminal investigation?
Well, social media was full of suggestions that I had something to do with it, which I did not even a little bit. But they decided that this was a case that they should pursue, partly because, some of these people who were in a position of trust betrayed their trust, and partly, I think, to send a message to medical professionals and others, don't do that sort of thing. And because it happens a lot, and it needs to stop. And I think that's why they proceeded, why they proceeded with those as assiduously as they did. I mean, it was not just the LAPD, it was the Sheriff's Department, it was the FBI, it was the DEA, it was, it was a whole bunch of agencies that got together and said, we're gonna nail this thing down, and we're gonna find whoever we can find and make an example of them, because the abuse of opioids and ketamine and God knows what else in America is it's kind of beyond a reckoning. I don't even know if you can keep track of it all. It's so bad. So I talk about our story, but our story is just one of millions of stories.
Yeah, I mean that's what you really saw in the days after and months after the criminal investigation being announced. And I should mention 5 people have been charged in connection with Matthew's death, 3 of whom have entered guilty pleas for their roles in providing ketamine to Matthew. But you're right. I mean, I think I don't know anyone in Canada who has not gone through something like this. And the feeling that I get from those who are left behind, those who are family members, those who are friends of the people that have died of overdose or that died of drug abuse, is a tremendous anger an anger at the people who might have supplied, the anger at doctors, anger at drug dealers, anger at middlemen. And you have this, you have this journalistic way about you of covering crime and journalistic way about you of covering stuff like this. But Keith, I can't imagine the anger you must have felt.
It's such a familiar thing. I've sat across from probably literally thousands of people over the years who have felt that very anger and talk about it and describe what they went through, what they would like to see happen to whoever did a bad thing to their loved one. And so I guess my perspective is a little bit different. It's really more. Suzanne is furious, especially at the people who were trusted more than anyone else. I'm very sad and not surprised. The venality of some of these professionals is just. It still shocks me, and yet I hear about it again and again and again and again. And I shouldn't talk too much about this case because it's ongoing. But the people who were put in a position of trust, who all they had to do was lift up the telephone and say he's in trouble, and the cavalry would have been there. I'm very pleased and happy that we're able to be in Ottawa and open this new foundation because it is. I know it is something that he would be very, very happy about. I know the kind of people we are meeting who are helping us with this, who are tops in their field in the country. Some amazing people who are offering opportunities and ideas for treating addiction, which go beyond anything he was able to find anywhere to help him. Even though he had endless money to throw at the problem, there wasn't the kind of treatment that was going to fix it for him or help him fix it for good. And this is what we're working at now. It's championing some people who are doing some significant research in this, partnering with, to begin with the Royal in Ottawa and Hospital in Ottawa and hopefully other hospitals in the country too at some point once we get rolling here, to provide more kind of long-term care. One of the very biggest problems for addicts, most addicts, they're not millionaires or billionaires or whatever, they don't have a lot of money. Mostly they don't have enough money even to have a place to live. So housing is probably one of the most significant overlooked problems where it comes to helping addicts survive their problems. So there's a housing element. There's treatment is not going to work if you just have it for 1 month. At least it won't work for a guy like Matthew. But if you can have somebody in a treatment program in housing that'll work for them, in a place where they can be cared for on a regular basis, watched on a regular basis, treated every day, and for a year or more, then they've got a real shot at a life coming out the other end. So those are the kinds of things we're looking at now, and more as they come along, because it's given us some purpose now.
What do you think Matthew would feel seeing this foundation take up this mission he had towards the end of his life?
Well, I hope it's what he would think would be a grand idea. His little sister is, up to her elbows in the hard work on the Canadian Foundation, and his friends from boyhood are also deeply involved. Everybody is really enthusiastically committed to this, and we call around, and they do mostly, and talk to people in significant positions around the country, and the enthusiasm that they're receiving for this is extraordinary and surprising. It's kind of like the reaction to his death. The outpouring has been gratifying, and I hope we see more and more of it.
Keith, I can't thank you enough for making the time to chat with us today. And
Thank you.
again, my condolences to you and to your wife. And I've been reflecting on a lot of that myself, just that the hope that something good can come out of this, and that he was able to articulate before his death the good he wanted to come out of it, the good he wanted to come out of the life that he has led. And I've a great admiration for you that you're able to make some of this happen. Thanks for making the time for us.
Thank you, Tom.